And we are, as a people, inherently and historically
Wake up.
opposed to secret societies, the secret oaths,
Gonna ask a question.
and the secret proceedings.
The show that asks questions about why we don't ask questions.
What the hell is going on?
This is Conspiracy Queries with Alan Park. Welcome to Conspiracy Queries with Alan Park, broadcasting from the new, amazing downtown Toronto SiriusXM building for the very first show. Hopefully it will be glitch-free. That's not exactly how it turned out. But, whenever you transition from one thing to the other, there are problems. You just can't get that new car smell in your old car, right? Well, we've got a great show today. We're going to talk with someone that knows a lot about secret societies, what they talk about, what they do, and apparently there's a war going on inside those secret societies, and we'll see if that affects us out here in the real world, where we're struggling to make do with the horrible news that's all over the front pages of the newspapers and CNN. They're all talking about it. Oh, no, wait a minute. They're not really all talking about it at all. But I think it's the biggest story going on right now. And that, of course, is the end of civilization as we know it, courtesy of the nuclear meltdown that's taking place in Japan right now. I don't know if it's latent racism in me, or some kind of horrible thing about me, a bit of a prejudice that I might be sporting. But first of all, I'm kind of irritated at myself for not realizing before the nuclear meltdown took place in Japan a little bit more about Japan that I had no idea was basically a nation perched upon a volcanic ridge and an earthquake-laden ridge where those things do actually happen. I didn't know enough about Japan to know that they kind of do that from time to time, but I can promise you, if I did know about that, I would not have then gone ahead and built a series of nuclear reactors all along the edge of the country. So now, somebody in Japan really has poor foresight, at the very least. You just don't put buildings like that are designed to melt down on the edge. Why don't you build a house of cards built upon a toothpick on a vibrating platform and see if that works any better for you? But things are dire in Fukushima, and I guess one of the reasons it's not on the press all the time is that so many of the broadcasting major entities are electric companies or paid for by them. And they don't want to realize that, hey, thanks for the idea, this doesn't work anymore. So I'm going to turn now to McMeany's Rebellious Independent News and Film, also known as RINF, to give you this little article. We are in desperate need of documentary filmmakers at Fukushima. And bring one of those lab coats, one of those shields you wear when you get an x-ray at the dentist's office. See if you can make yourself a tent out of that while you're walking around over there. The Japanese government is about to pass a national censorship law, clearly meant to make it impossible to know what's going on there. I think they've already passed one of those in Canada. Massive quantities of radioactive water have been flowing through the site of Fukushima since the 3/11/11 earthquake/tsunami. 1,000 flimsy tanks still hold more thousands of tons of radioactive water, which could pour into the Pacific as soon as they collapse, which is looking very likely. An earthquake and 2 typhoons have just hit there. 5.9, I believe one of them was, and that flushed even more radioactive water into the sea. The corrupt and incompetent TEPCO, Tokyo Electric Power Company, will soon try moving 400 tons of supremely radioactive rods from a damaged Unit 4 fuel pool Oh, it sounds relaxing, doesn't it? Shall I meet you at the fuel pool? This is going to be an operation that could easily end in global catastrophe. The rods contain 14,000 times as much radioactive cesium as was released at the bombing of Hiroshima. Just so you know. Just so that somebody's talking about it. That's what's going on in Japan and could roll around the world. Now another quick segment of Meet the New Owners. You know, Canada's pretty much been bought up by the Chinese, and the Chinese are fairly well running things now. There's nothing we can do about that, but the least we can do is get to know a little bit more about our owners. And so here's a report on gutter oil. What? Gutter oil? Yeah, gutter oil. This is from Canada.com. If you're taking a trip to China soon, you may want to plan your meals in advance to avoid gutter oil. This is a cooking oil made from animal fats found in garbage, meat scraps, and even grease found in sewage, all mixed together and processed before being sold off to restaurants and street vendors. And hotels, I'm also informed. There's a video here that explains the process. Basically, peasants scoop the guck out of outdoor sewer grates, and they get paid by the bucket, and then the buckets are transported to a big boiler, like a Chinese Breaking Bad, only instead of making crack, they're making fake oil to cook fake food in. So yeah, pack a lunch, bring some dehydrateds if you're going there. And that is Meet the New Owners. Well, I can't believe it. We're already this far into the show. It is time to speak with our interviewee. On the show with me today, we've got a real live secret society expert in Frater X. His knowledge runs deep into fields that are considered esoteric, which could prove to be a problem if he puts things on the net in England, now that they have a new law where the government can shut down a website if it is considered esoteric. I guess the question there is, who's doing the considering as to whether it's esoteric or not? Well, the government, of course. So we'll see what time has to say about that. But our guest today, Frater X, is also extremely knowledgeable in matters generally known as the occult. Now, that's a bad word for a lot of people, the occult, because, well, for some people, they've already made up their minds that the word is a bad thing. And then it's also a bad word for people who know exactly what it does mean and would rather you don't find out. So we will also be talking about the occult. Now, I know there are several trigger points in my life, both externally and internally, that have put me on a path where I just want to know the truth. And I'm still working on that. And I don't know if that will ever end. Perhaps if I were a member of the Masonic Rosicrucians or the Knights Templar or the Ancient Order of Druids, I might know as much about truth as our guest today, who is a member of those aforementioned groups, a.k.a. Esoteric Orders. And he is here with us right now. Thank you for coming on the show, Frater X.
Hey, Alan, how's it going?
Hey, good. Thank you. Thank you for coming on today. Was that enough of an intro?
Thanks for having me. Yeah, it was great. Thanks for
welcome.
having me.
Tell us a little bit about some of these esoteric orders that you're a part of before we get into the meat of the matter, which is the secret war on human consciousness, because a lot of people have some pretty skewed and or negative ideas of what a Mason is or what a Knights Templar is, and you are involved with many of those. So tell us a little bit about how those work for you in your life.
Well, first of all, let me say that I too began with a lot of fear and aversion and suspicion with regards to all these different fraternal esoteric orders, especially here in America, which is what I pretty much exclusively have experience in America. I've researched internationally, but I've really only personally experienced going through lodge systems in America. But it's a good what I would say a good sampling, to look at the American experience as far as worldwide esoteric orders, and then we both know the impact that members of these orders have had worldwide, throughout history. So, but personally, my experiences have been both positive and negative. I was drawn by sheer curiosity. I think that probably a lot of the listeners and you yourself, Alan, can appreciate the motivation of curiosity and of wanting to know more, wanting to understand the truth about things. And I, early on in my young adult life, in my 20s, I became aware of this history of the fraternal orders, the Freemasons and the Knights Templar, the chivalric orders, and other esoteric and secret societies, and I was just like, what is this all about? And I began to look at a lot of the negative press, obviously, because there's so much, and a lot of the accusations out there. But my experience, Alan, maybe you can relate to this, has always been one in which when I've investigated closely any subject of interest, I've found oftentimes that the majority of the opinions have been misdirected, misguided, and misunderstood. And this is one area in which, once again, the rule proved to be, the reality of the situation. And what I found was that when you push aside a lot of the hype, hysteria, and misinformation with regards to these orders, you find something beneath that is worthy of notice, is worthy of attention for those who feel drawn to the subject matter. And what I personally found is that at the root of all these orders was a system of education, of self-education for the individual who feels drawn to these systems. This is something that's been lost in the shuffle, in the politics and the social aspects of these orders, especially in America, the political and social currents that have taken over these orders. And that's partially what my research gets into.
Is
especially
that the lost, the 7 liberal arts?
Well, that's a perfect example. Within what you're referring to is within the Blue Lodge system or the Freemasonic system, you have a call to the candidate who's being initiated into the degrees. He's admonished and he's encouraged to pursue the 7 liberal arts, which is also known as the quadrivium and the trivium, and these are the foundations of Western education, as it were. Now
these were also much more touched upon in what was, I guess, mainstream education and schooling a long time ago, and then somehow that wasn't there anymore for the regular folk, and it was all absorbed into secret orders.
Well, I think it's remarkable that this is the beginning of the subject as we discuss the secret orders and the fraternal orders. We find education is the thrust and the focus, and as you have pointed out, here in our culture, in society, especially postmodern America, but I'm sure worldwide. Again, I can only speak to what I have experience with. And here in America, we both know that the education system is a joke. It's a farce. I mean, it is a dumbing down system. And there are plenty of researchers out there, for example, like John Taylor Gatto, who wrote The Underground History of American Education and Dumbing Us Down, to map out for anyone who's interested in looking at the history of how this process started. I mean, John Taylor Gatto quotes in the Underground History of American Education that the level of literacy in the colonies in America was above 80%. Think about it. The pamphleteers, the colonial bloggers and podcasters were the pamphleteers, like Thomas Paine, for example, with Common Sense. They were handing out literature, so you had to be able to read to really appreciate it. And as we know, people read this material, and it inspired a revolution. So we go from this high level of literacy to standards today put us below 40%, below 30%, and this is if whatever you're deciding is really literacy, whether you're talking about functional literacy or actually being literate, because there's a difference.
Yeah, it's 40% of a dumbed down system, where it was 80% before, of a much more difficult and much more worthwhile body of knowledge.
Yeah, and if you look at the material that was coming out in the 18th century, 17th century, 18th century, and 19th century comparatively, you see grammar school and middle school students excelling far beyond the standard of learning that we see, today. And so you ask yourself why, and that's where it all began for me, Alan. I asked myself why. Why is this all happening? What is going on here? And what I discovered was that there is, in fact, a secret war on human consciousness. It's an information war of perception, a war that's being waged by the global power elite in our world, whether you're in Canada, whether you're in France, whether you're in Japan, America, anywhere you're at. The leadership of these countries have designed a playbook in which the mass of the population must be kept stupid. And they must be kept because people who are uneducated and uninformed are easier to control. And this war is against all life on Earth. And it's against the awakening of humanity, that there is, in fact, a secret war on human consciousness that is an information war on perception, of perception. And this war is being waged by the global power elite against all life on Earth and against the awakening of humanity to higher consciousness, that we might instead remain asleep to the control and restraints that are placed upon us. And this is the root of the fear that's engendered in our Western culture with regards to all things esoteric and occult. Because the word occulted, occultare, comes from Latin and Greek. Occultare means hidden, to be hidden, a thing that is hidden. Hidden knowledge, hidden wisdom, hidden understanding.
Like an Easter egg. Oh, sorry, I don't want to mix metaphors with you.
Well, yeah. I mean,
when you say there's a war on, and I understand where you're coming from, to my knowledge, when you have a war, you have at least two sides. What is the aggressor side in this war? Who would you put the blame on? Or who would you direct your energy to? Is it a collective of societies, or are we dealing with families, or is it both? Can you break it down for us?
Well, I think we have the usual suspects. I mean, to simplify it for those listening today in a way that speak in the language of the postmodern world we live in, call it the bankster thugs if you want. Call it, like I said, the global power elite. It's the few. I mean, listen, I learned a long time ago, and maybe people don't agree with this or not, but in my opinion, there's only really two kinds of people in the world. Those who have to work and those that don't. And this is the line that's drawn. I think that the ultra wealthy, the ultra powerful in our world want to remain so, and they do it at the expense and efforts of the masses. And this is a system that was set in place tens of thousands of years ago, as far as I'm concerned.
Well, what are they getting out of this, though? Let me ask, what are they getting out of this? Because it's so difficult now. There are people working so many jobs, and you say there's a war on consciousness. It's certainly the fact if you have 2 or 3 jobs, you can't spend the time to keep up with this stuff. And yet, if you are keeping up with this stuff, you might find a way that you don't need the 3 jobs. They have a perfect elliptical wheel there, a hamster wheel to have us all running on. But my great concern here is that how do they force this agenda to the point where we are so stretched? I mean, they were still in control of these banksters, as you say, back in the 50s. And although we had societal unrest, a prejudice against black people and that kind of thing, there was a general higher sense of prosperity and enjoyment. Some horrible things that were supposed to be wonderful for us, like the chemical age, were just coming in. But there was a stronger sense of economy and self-wealth after the Second World War, and the disparity between a CEO's salary was nowhere near what it is, and one of his workers is nowhere near what it is now. So, why do they have to push it this hard? And do you see it going back to a slightly easier time to help us ease through the bottleneck?
Well, I hate to sound cynical or here, but I got to be honest. I think that all along, the ideals that were presented to people, especially like American exceptionalism and the American dream, was always designed as merely a coercive factor. I think that it has always been in the mix to lead us to where we are today. It's just been a matter of concessions and little crumbs and little biscuits being thrown here and there where necessary. I mean, look at the root of the founding of America. You asked what do they gain out of it? Well, bottom line, the initial gain is purely wealth and then there's the power that comes with it. But I think you need to think in terms. I think we need to take and expand our scope. See, in our world, we're conditioned to narrow our awareness down to the narrow bandwidth of what could be called sensory materialism, where we merely are concerned with our basic sustenance, the struggle to survive, pay the bills, work, and just keeping in that narrow bandwidth instead of expanding the view and realizing considering the three great questions that humanity must consider. Who are we? Where did we come from? And where are we going? We have been taught that humanity rose up out of Sumer, society just instantaneously appeared without any kind, almost non sequitur. Went from wandering Bedouin tribes, and then all of a sudden there's Sumer, with like 16-digit mathematical equations and astronomical knowledge and all these ability to build amazing structures, seemingly impossibly. Out of nowhere, there's something wrong with that story. But when you investigate, when a person actually goes in and looks, they find, wow, there's a whole conflicting body of evidence out there that says humanity is far older than we've been told. And that right there opens the door. If humanity is hundreds of thousands of years old as civilized cultural species, not this 10,000 year timeline we're given, it opens the door of possibilities on what we're doing here, where we came from, and where we should be going. This is the expansive view. And I think that people who are in positions of power in the world, they have an expansive view. They have long, drawn out timelines with agendas that cross generations.
Do we have access to any of their plans? I mean, if we're just garbage to be used along the way and fuel to be used along the way, what is where can we find out exactly where it is they think they're heading off of our blood and sweat?
Well, I think it behooves the individual to pursue that question on their own and to try to to draw from the experience of our world today. If you look around you, I think it's really clear. You can find evidence all around you of what their plan is for us. The transhumanism agenda, for example. I mean, that's right there. That alone, they want to marry humanity with machine, and that's one of the agendas. The industrialization of our society, the militarization of our society. We are moving towards a postmodern Sparta, where we are completely mobilized and militarized. I mean, I live in a college town. And every morning I drive through campus on the way to work, and there are, these troops of ROTC students, running down the road, militarized. It's just, it's spooky to me. It really is. And then you look at the law enforcement, the militarization of law enforcement. Whenever there's any kind of incident, you hear in the news all the time now, these school shootings and these violent incidents. The lingo they use to describe the policies, like the schools go into quote unquote lockdown. This term comes from penitentiaries. They put prisoners in lockdown when there's a security violation. When the violation of security of the institution, you lock it down, you make all the prisoners go back to their cells, and you do head counts. And this is how the terminology they're using on our students, on our children, on our schooling.
Yeah, I sometimes think that they are actually in their goal of dumbing us down. I believe that they think they are further ahead with that goal than they really are. Let me give you an example. I just saw a video the other day of a man who was describing what happened to himself at the flurry of activity that was the shooting at LAX. You heard about that?
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah, so he goes into detail with a local television reporter about what happened to him. And isn't it exactly the same guy, by voice pattern and by mannerisms and by looks, the same guy who happened to, as he said, witness the 9/11 towers collapsing in New York and gave a very seemingly clinical description of what happened moments after the buildings fell. And he said, and the buildings collapsed due to heat, due to exposure from the heat. And this guy had the science of it down, the meme down, before they even started to look into that stuff. And this is the same guy that had to that announced at LAX airport that he was checked by the police, he was handcuffed, and they went through his bags. They found no ID or money, and so they let him go. And this is, they call them crisis actors. And I didn't want to believe this, but it's the same guy. I mean, what are the odds of that?
Yeah, well, I mean, again, I don't want to sound cynical here, but everything is completely contrived. You look back in history. I was just looking at old newsreels today of Harry Truman talking about the reasons why they decided to bomb Hiroshima and Nagasaki, right? And I mean, he's going on. At first, it was just because they were going to save thousands of lives. That's what in 45, that's what they said. In 49, it was 500,000 lives. In 53, it was millions of lives were saved, and then in 91. When Bush again praised Truman for his actions, we saved millions of lives by blowing up Hiroshima and Nagasaki. It's a complete fabrication. We know for a fact that the Japanese were going to surrender. They were trying to surrender. We had already bombed 100 Japanese cities to dust. I mean, we'd killed already hundreds of thousands of Japanese civilians. I mean, and they're trying to tell us that the threat was so great they had to bomb these two cities. And the news bite, the sound bite that was created. When I was a child, I remember asking my parents, why did they do that? Why didn't they just go in and invade? And my father, without missing a beat, gave the exact same summation that Harry Truman gave. He said, because we wanted to save lives.
Yeah,
that was
the
reason.
Well, speaking of lives, if one doesn't have the time to join the many orders that you have gained great knowledge from, how does one begin to cut through the lies? Because even people that don't agree with the agenda, they have at odds point of view on what things are what things are really going on. And how does one just cut through the nonsense and see something like a crisis actor and do a little research? How can people be encouraged to do that?
Well, let's bridge these two things together, because for the listeners are thinking to themselves, well, what did he learn, and how does that affect how one would assess, like you're saying, these current events or our news, the things that we're told in our society today. The fact of the matter is when I entered the orders, I had sort of a mercenary motive because I wanted to know the truth. I was seeking the answers that I thought I would find within the orders. And I'm here to report to most people, what I sought was not there. I didn't find what I thought I was going to find or what I was looking for in the truth of, what's really going on. But what I did find was a method to improve my ability to process what I was experiencing and the information that I was gathering. So there's a distinction there that should be made. And also what I found, what I can report to all the listeners here, is that what is contained therein is available to anyone who seeks it outside of these orders. They do not hold them, they don't corner the market on what's there. It's just that these different organizations, what people will call secret societies, are a place where an individual might come into an arena or a forum, if you will, and explore the subjects that are discussed. And the subjects that are discussed are the subjects that anyone, if they with a quick tertiary search online of like the Hermetic arts, esoteric and occult sciences, there are some key things that'll come up, like ancient sacred geometry, alchemy, Kabbalah, just basically the other sciences and wisdom aside from the Catholic Church and the magisterium and the ecclesiastical hierarchical authority. That's what occulted knowledge is all about. The idea of what is hidden is things that have been hidden out of survival. Because back in, before the Renaissance and the Dark Ages, and even during the Renaissance, if you explored these issues openly, you could be killed for it. The Inquisition would show up and kill you or your family or both. For the Bruno, they killed his mother, I think. Giordano Bruno, I think it was his mother they killed for his insights. And, Galileo knew that. He was scared. So they threaten your family and they torture and imprison you for considering this knowledge aside from what is now. The church has the universal view. The Catholic universal view was how it began for Christendom, which was all of the world that wasn't Hindu or Islam or Buddhist or Taoist. That was all of Christendom. So the entire world where Christians lived was Christendom. And within that umbrella, there was the official version of the universe and the cosmos as laid down by the church. If you went outside that, the idea of a heretic, the word heretic from the Greek is heresis, which means chooser, one who chooses, to choose another view, to choose to look at something from a different perspective than the Catholic, or Orthodox. Orthodox means straight, the straight view.
I believe that's a sin, though, isn't it, Frater, to choose for oneself?
Absolutely. Heretics were killed regularly because you weren't allowed. So see, there's the message to the individual. You're not allowed to choose how to think. Even though you were given a brain, you're not allowed to choose how you're to think, or you will be killed for your thoughts. So that's that multi-generational engendering of fear and suspicion towards that which is outside of the box. Anything outside the box is terrifying, and it exists up to today. Why is it that we are conditioned in our society to accept tacitly and out of hand government secrecy? Up until recently, it's like, it's a given that they'll go by the Congress and the politicians would go behind the closed doors and they'll make a deal and then they'll come out and tell us what's going on. That's just accepted by our society. It's a given, right?
Yeah,
but that's the kind of secrecy that's wrong.
It seems to me the kind of pattern that you're talking about. It just strikes me as you're speaking that the choosing and the not really being allowed to choose. The key that is really what they're doing. The suppression of choice is by seemingly propagating it so much. The choice factor. You have a choice in this election. You have a wonderful choice. You can either vote this one party or this other party, both of which are attached to the corporatist structure. Or they'll, you go to a supermarket and they say, America has the most unbelievable selection of different choices in a supermarket. But when you really read the labels, it's all some sort of oil and corn derivative. It's not really a choice at all. Right. It's more of an option.
Yeah, it's a variety of one choice. It's just a variety of one choice. And
they get people to think that it's they get people to think it's you've got a bounty there, but there are really only a couple of things, and then they're really removing actual choice from people and calling it a sin.
Right. So it's a controlled choice. It's a controlled environment of freedom. It's freedom within this small little narrow bandwidth once again. But it's just like with the political system of Republican or Democrat in America, what a farce. I mean, it's the same party. It really is the same party. Just two branches of the same party, but everybody believes that they have a choice because they're buying into the civic mythology, which was laid down long ago. But so the idea of government secrecy versus lodge or esoteric secrecy. The oaths of secrecy within secret societies were originally intended to protect the esoteric traditions and teachings rather than the order and its hierarchy. It's not the order as an organized body, which is important, but the order system. It's the mystery teachings and its time-honored methods of spiritual development within. The lodge or these particular order of secrecy that we could look at are simply a temporary vehicle of transmission or a delivery system, a means whereby suitable individuals, people who are called to it, people who feel qualified or an acumen or aptitude, they may be trained to awaken within their own hearts and minds higher states of awareness and existence. And this, my friend, is very dangerous to social scientists and government controllers.
Now, is this connected at all to I know you've written in a book about synchronicity, and you were an author of the Sync book or the Sync book 2?
Yeah, I'm one of the 26 authors that are in Sync Book Volume 2 that's brought to you by Sync Book Press, who's also going to be publishing my upcoming book, The Secret War Inside Freemasonry, which deals with a little bit more specific struggle within the organization. So and anybody interested in that book, or they can go to Amazon, they can go to CreateSpace, and also thesyncbook.com.
Yeah, we're going to link those up to you at the end of the show. We'll definitely get those hot buttons up for people to listen to. But tell us a little bit about what synchronicity is.
Let me put it this way. I've come to realize I've been broadcasting my own weekly live radio broadcasts on American Freedom Radio for the last 3 years. And, before that, a decade of talking to people and researching and learning things. And I've come to realize that, I believe I am somewhat of an advocate for all the occulted sciences, esoteric studies, and hermetic arts, all of which are in fact tools that bring about transformative change in consciousness in accordance with the individual's will. And so when I wrote that, my chapter of the Sync book was a way for me to sort of speak to that and to show people that I believed that these systems that we're being conditioned to be afraid of actually are there as almost like our birthright. These are in fact the mystery teachings and tools and lessons that were excised from our consciousness millennia ago because they interfered with control. And so, from my perspective, I believe that these tools are here to basically, we could step into the circuitry of the cosmos, to coin a phrase from another writer and researcher, Lon Milo Duquette, that's his term. He talks about it. Where the systems that you find within the Hermetic arts and the different occulted orders are methods for the individual to gain access to heightened states of awareness, spiritual development, metaphysical practices. These are approaches to awareness which enable the individual to access the more symbolic and archetypal levels of consciousness. For example, it's like the DOS, or the machine language of consciousness. This is to put it in computer terms for individuals who might understand this. There's an inner programming. We have at the base of all computing, there's an inner program, the machine language and the DOS system, which is one of the original languages, and then this is like our inner programming. I make the analogy there. There's the HTML of everyday awareness, that's like the language of the internet, right? And then there's this greater, deeper consciousness that it's not like the modern awareness that we're working with.
And so when you maintain your thinking and your awareness on those lines, they're very ancient. These ways of thinking, through Hermes and all of the teachings through Egypt. So they're ancient teachings, which means it also took a lot of time to be able to arrive at that genius. So how far back are we going here?
I would say going back to the beginnings of human consciousness. I think the underlying traditions and symbolic archetypes that we find in these systems are inherent to human consciousness. These principles of natural law that I'm sure you've heard of, or what could be called the universal laws of consciousness, find their origin in the ancient shamanic concepts and ideas of early or original human consciousness. In other words, at the root of thinking, it was the early shamans of our human tribes, I believe, that developed these approaches to greater and higher levels of consciousness outside of the normal everyday web of communication that we all exist in. So there's this normal everyday modern awareness, and then there's these deeper, more symbolic or archetypal. We've heard psychology use different terms to describe it and break it down, but there is a deeper layer here that we all know plays a part in our awareness and our behavior and our understanding of the world around us. It plays such a huge part in how we frame the world around and reinforce how we think about ourselves and the world we live in. And I believe that somewhere along the way that this problem occurred in humanity, which we could call the desacralization of reality. And it plagues our modern society. We have nothing sacred. Nothing is sacred. And I think for myself, I realized in my own self that it was essential in the process of my own growth that I could re-sacralize, the re-sacralization of my own awareness, the reactivating of the sacred in my own psyche, and therefore raising the collective awareness of society. Not like I'm trying to think about bringing everybody over to my side. That's not necessary. But just enough people to tip the seesaw in the other direction, so to speak, So for me, these methods of approach to reality are the greatest response we could have today to what I believe plagues humanity.
You're saying it's coming from the industrialization of society all around us.
Well, I'm saying that's the symptom of this disorder. If you can look at the Grail imagery, for example, the Western tradition of the Holy Grail, the quest for the Holy Grail. And when the Grail Knight enters the Grail Castle, what does he find? He finds a wounded king, a king who's wounded, and he has a sexual wound. By the way, it's a sexual wound, like there's a damage between the sexes, and then what's happened? The Grail Queen is gone. So the sacred feminine's gone. The sacred masculine has a sexual wound, and the land is a wasteland. That's what we find. And so then the Grail Knight has to ask a question. And the answer is no, but it's not the answer that matters. It's the question. So it's like what we're being told in this myth is that our thought process is the way out. You have to formulate the question with your mind in order to relieve the wound that the sacred masculine has endured, to restore the sacred feminine, and to rejuvenate the land. This is the myth of the Grail. This is what's at the core of it. Why? What's being presented here? I would propose to you that what we see in our modern society, the militarization of society, is the result of this. The result of this millennia-long program to bring us all to a place where we would see nothing as sacred, and where we would be coerced into being okay with committing inhumane acts against each other and our environment.
Yeah, and that's what you have now with a police state, that's for sure. I mean, the amount of heavy protest that just gets amped up by agents provocateur, and they're always putting up these divisive lines, and, with the NSA snooping into everything that everyone's doing and has been doing that for a long time. Not that revelation was all that new at the time. But, it's just I just can't seem to understand how much more control and power can they need. I mean, they need more money. They print more money. You're talking about these esoteric teachings from millennia ago, and that these are where the answers are for us. And at the same time, they've just got us all on a hamster wheel chasing after little pieces of paper.
So just to be clear about this, just to clarify what you've said, it's not that I feel as if the answers are specifically lying within the esoteric teachings. What I believe is our exposure to these systems prepares, reconfigures our own awareness so that we might find the real answers. You see, that's the distinction. So it's like you could give a man a fish, or you could teach him how to fish. And so the idea is that we need to reconfigure our awareness in order to receive the truth, in order to perceive and receive and communicate it. And that's the call today for all of us. We're in an amazing time. Yeah, it's scary. There's a lot of dark forces forming all around us, and it's scary. But it's also exciting and amazing because, like I mentioned earlier, we are the modern-day pamphleteers. You are, I am, the bloggers out there, the other podcasters. We are the new media. We are the ones who are really getting to the core of what's going on, and we are the ones who are shaking the pillars of the establishment. And it's working. People, I mean, haven't you noticed? In the last 10 years, people have shifted in their being open to these concepts. I've been amazed at how many people now come up to me and reflect back to me things I was thinking in the mid to late 90s when I felt like a voice in the wilderness, completely alone. No one else no one wanted to hear about the Anunnaki or, Planet X or, any of the things that we discuss in this, truther sphere that we, just to coin a phrase, but now people are far more open to these ideas and they're far more open to the problems of government secrecy and the problems of the elitist policies that have guided and controlled and led our cultures, for generations.
Yeah, I'm more cautious on that front. I agree with what you're saying, but I'm always skeptical of, as these avenues open up, of I don't know if you want to call it COINTELPRO or misinformation, disinformation camps that get their way into these avenues of consciousness, awareness, and exploration, and then just bastardize it with falsehoods, which then create divisions, and then you're back to the old how do you tell when they're lying again? So you constantly have to have that meter in front of yourself to make sure you're not getting snowed at every turn.
Absolutely, and it's a form, marginalization. It goes on. And then what I call like the X-Files effect. They trivialize so many issues on the X-File, so that it's like if you ever bring up anything that was on the X-Files, people can go, "Oh yeah, you watch the X-Files a lot, don't you?" It's like, did that serve anybody to do that? To trivialize everything like that? It really didn't. And then of course we know they led us down a rabbit hole with that. Anybody who used to watch that show, we a lot of us bought into the thing, thinking that they were actually going to reveal some truths on this silly Sunday night, hour-long drama on Fox. You know what I mean? It's ridiculous. But
Yeah.
in the end, it trivializes everything. But you're right. So you should be cautious. All the more reason to strengthen your reasoning and your mind, because who else, if not your own thoughts and your own instincts, your own intuition, your own convictions? Where else is anyone going to discern the truth if not there?
That is the starting point. That is the way to go. Well, that's great. So you're now. I want to get into a little bit before we leave. We're going to run out of time shortly, but I want to make sure people are able to find you and tell us a bit about what you're doing. You're actually changing. Tell us more about your book. That is, I believe you sent to me basically a thesis, but it's coming into a book. The War Within the Masonic. Well, you know the title of it better than I do.
Yes. Well, the title is The Secret War Inside Freemasonry.
Okay.
And this is directly related to my own personal experiences when I entered the lodge system and found that there was an ideological struggle going on within the lodge system that is a microcosmic example. And what I found, what really excited me, and the reason why I wrote the article for Paranoia Magazine called The Secret War on Human Consciousness, which I sent you a copy of, and the reason why I got so excited about this because I discovered, I perceived a pattern. I saw that within the struggle within the lodge system, which I'm mapping out in this book, was a microcosmic example of the macrocosmic overarching theme of a secret war on all human consciousness. And it is this usurpation and counterfeiting of true knowledge and wisdom. So you have a system that might have some sort of knowledge and wisdom to convey. You have infiltrators from the outside who come in, who assume authority, who take control, usurp the system, and then replace it with a counterfeit version that is basically a method of distracting or diverting any real thinking people down a rabbit hole, which will keep them dumbed down and really far away from the truth and far away from understanding. And this is what I found going on, not only within the lodge systems, but then I recognize the pattern, all around me in our culture, PhD programs and the levels of standards of academic, proficiency. It's so clearly everyone being specialized in one field. I mean, America used to be founded, and where at one point, at least in our civic mythology, we're told, there people were all, jack of all trades, master of none. So everybody had to do everything for themselves. Nowadays, we only do one thing. We call somebody else to take care of everything else. It's like the exact opposite.
And they're usually in India.
Yeah, right. And or they're some really overpriced other specialized skill that's being brought in to basically generate revenue. And in the end, though, so I was able to. I've been in a unique position to be able to make connection with the publishers at the Sync Book Press. They invited me to do a chapter of the Sync Book Volume 2. I pitched the idea of the book. They were very interested, and they thought it was very relevant to what's going on right now in our world and the interest of those out there who want to know more about the especially the Freemasonic order. So, yeah, I mean, it is exciting to me because I made this connection, and it is a thesis. It is a working thesis. And last April, I went to Philadelphia to the Free Your Mind conference, the second Free Your Mind conference. The first one was in 2011, and presented my research that became the article, but it was in a PowerPoint presentation with 42. PowerPoint images and it was really well received, and it was all videotaped. And anyone who's interested, if they go to freemantv.com, they can download that. It's right on the front page. That Frater X.
freemantv.com, right?
freemantv.com, yeah, and that's my Frater X's Secret War on Human Consciousness, and also my own blog. I have two blogs. One is Middle Chamber, the letters FX. middlechamberfx.wordpress.com. So middlechamberfx.wordpress.com. That's the main blog connected to my radio podcast, which is called The Middle Chamber with Frater X. I'm just really excited about being able to map out this microcosmic example of what I believe to be the dumbing down of our society. The idea of the secret war inside Freemasonry is a perfect model of what I see as the overarching theme of the secret war on human consciousness, and being able to map it out in the little model form in an interesting context, because so many people have, so many people are so interested in and curious. The general consensus about what's going on with these secret societies and secrecy in Western esoteric systems, and the distinction between secrecy in lodges versus government secrecy. And so it's an exciting opportunity for me to map it out in the small model form of the secret war inside Freemasonry, which was my own personal experience of struggle between different orders that are attached to Freemasonry within, and what I found to be, I believe, a corrosive strain that I feel has wormed its way into our government, into the highest levels of business, industry, in our
absolutely.
society. And it's the same idea of usurping and counterfeiting knowledge and wisdom. It's the same playbook, the same page out of the same playbook over and over again. If you look at the PhD programs in the universities, the academic standards of proficiency in the schools, you find this specialization of knowledge and subject matter, which really weakens the scholar, weakens the student. If you specialized in one field, you exclude all else. And if you talk to anyone, any so-called educated person today, they specialize in their one field, and they cannot assemble a barbecue in their backyard.
Right.
They can't even read instructions on a basic assembly of products or whatever. But they are like a rocket scientist or a particle physicist or something. But
that's the inherent pattern, though. That's the inherent pattern of control, where everything's fractionalized into a lower piece, exactly. And the left hand doesn't know what the right hand's doing. And once again, it's our friend sitting at the top directing everything.
Right. And so, I don't know if this came in the segment where we kind of blanked out, but like I said, in April, I was invited to speak at the Free Your Mind conference in Philadelphia, and I was able to present my research, in a PowerPoint presentation. And that was all video recorded. Anyone who wants to check out my presentation of the secret war on human consciousness, PowerPoint presentation, 42 awesome animated slides. It was well received. It was videotaped. It's been edited and really mastered by a maestro videographer named Chris Valrafe, who was the one who filmed the entire event, and he's just amazing. He's going to be doing a lot of stuff with us in the future, but anyone who wants to check it out, and they go to freemantv.com and download that there. And there's going to be more speakers videos there too.
And what's the heading for it at Freeman TV? The heading for your this presentation?
Frater X at Free Your Mind Conference 2013. So, and it's right on the front page. When you go to freemantv.com, you'll see it right there, front and center.
Excellent.
And this is another thing about freemantv.com for anybody is interested in. We are working to produce a weekly, basically what we're calling it a truth or variety show. It's a truth or variety show. We're calling it Conspiracy Science Theater, and it's a combination of segments from different media producers, researchers, filmmakers, who are all under one umbrella, hosted by our friend Freeman Fly, who's the mastermind behind freemantv.com, and he's actually the one who got me my start in this podcasting world. But basically, I will have a segment called the Middle Chamber Video Series, where we have a lodge space set up, and I go through a lot of the symbolism and the tools and the archetypes that are involved in the esoteric orders. And then we have Kathy O'Brien, famous. She wrote wrote the book on monarch mind control, and she's going to be one of the people doing a segment. We have Dan Fogler, who is an actor who made the movie Don Peyote. He's worked with us before. He's really concerned about getting the truth out to people. He'll have a segment on it. It's an amazing cast of people who are getting involved in this, and it's going to be broadcast on the People's Voice Network that David Icke's starting in London. We've been asked to join that, and we're supposedly got Saturday night slot. So next month in November, we're supposed to launch the show, Conspiracy Science Theater, which is brought to everybody by freemantv.com, and which is also Blue Fly Production.
So any time now, because Frater, this is November.
This November, next month. This is this month, right? The end of this month. Yeah, we're in November. Pardon me. Yeah. And I'm also a creative consultant on a new little Android app phone game it's going to be based on like Illuminati game app for Android phones. So I've been asked to help, plan that out, kind of like a choose your own adventure mystery.
I notice the deeper we get into speaking about the Illuminati, it's quite obvious that my connection with you is being tampered with. You keep dropping in and out, Frater. Are you still there?
Yeah, I am here, but I hear you also dropping in and out.
It's crazy. Well, we just about are out of time, so let me just ask you again, are you going to be at Free Your Mind, the next Free Your Mind? Is there another Free Your Mind conference coming up?
Yeah, they're actually talking about doing one in New York City this time, and I know that Curtis Davis from the Occult Network and also Alan Steinfeld who's another researcher and presenter. They're both, I think, spearheading the organization to try to bring it to New York City this time, because twice it's been in Philadelphia. We don't have a date yet, but I know it's in the works, and they're trying to bring a lot of the same and new speakers to this event. Anybody who wants to check out all the other speakers that were there or stuff, they can go to freeyourmindconference.com. There's a website, and every happened. There's also some podcasts that are right there posted on the website from a marathon radio broadcast we did to raise money and awareness before the event. So all the guest speakers that were at the event were interviewed in podcasts, and they're all posted on the website. I interviewed Jim Fetzer, and I also interviewed Ben Stewart. And Bob Tuskin from IntelliHub was one of the hosts of that, as well as freemantv.com. And, of course, Mark Passio from whatonearthishappening.com was the one who pretty much – he was the brainchild behind it, and also Michael Falsetta behind the entire event. So it was phenomenal. It was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, and I would love to go to the next one. I'm waiting for the call.
Well, when we find out that you're there, I'll definitely see what I can do to get down there, and I would love to speak to you again right before you go, just to find out what kind of things you're going to bring to them. In the meantime, you can check out Frater X on freeman.tv.
freemantv.com.
That's what I said. freemantv.com. Why are you guys writing this down while you're driving anyway? Just listen to it later. freemantv.com. Frater X, thank you for coming on the show and helping us get through some of these quagmires.
Oh, Alan, believe me, it was an honor and a pleasure to speak with you, and I hope that I was clear in some ways with the subject. We kind of jumped around a little, and we had the technical interference from the dark occulted mystics out there. But
once I get the redacted version of the show back from NSA, I'm sure there'll be a lot more holes in it anyway.
I'll bet you got a big file over there at the NSA, right, Al?
I think so. They've got my name. All right, well, we'll talk to you again. Thanks very much for coming on the air.
Yeah, I'd love to come back on, Alan, once the book's released and talk some more about stuff.
Thanks for listening to Conspiracy Queries with Alan Park. Please offer comments or complaints by emailing conspiracyqueries@gmail.com or on Twitter @con_queries or at our website, conspiracyqueries.com. Thanks for listening.